It's 23 days to the Presidential National Assembly elections, and we're counting down as Nigerians prepare to vote. But for any presidential candidate to win elections in Nigeria, the Constitution states he or she must have a quota in 2/3 of the state and the FCT. And that's what we're talking about in the program. I am Nifemi Oguntoye. Thank you for joining us. Remember that you can join the conversation live using the hashtag TVC Countdown 2023. Section 134 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, as amended, is the go-to as to the two constitutional requirements for a president to emerge. A candidate, subsection 2 says, for an election to the office of the president shall be deemed to have been duly elected when, 1, he has the majority of vote cast at that election, and 2, he has not less than a quota, that's 25% of votes cast at the election in each of at least 2/3 of all the states in the Federation, as well as the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. Now, when the candidate with the highest vote does not fulfill these two requirements, this is what happens. In the default of a candidate duly elected in accordance with the subsection 2 of this section, there shall be a second election, what we know as a runoff. And this is going to happen between the candidate with the highest vote, as well as the other candidates from the other level of candidates. For instance, it's saying in subsection 4 of this section, at which the only candidate shall now be the candidate who scored the highest number of votes at any election held in accordance with the said subsection of this section, and also one among the remaining candidates who has majority of votes, but not just majority of votes, but majority of votes in the highest number of states. But however, where there are more than one candidate with majority of votes in the highest number of states, the candidate among them with the highest total of votes cast at that election will now be the second candidate for the runoff. Now let's take you down memory lane, because the presidential election held in August 1979 comes to mind. It was contested in court to determine whether or not statutory requirements were met and whether the leading candidate was validly declared winner of that election based on the requirements we're talking about. Shehu Shagari of the NPN satisfied the first condition of simple majority and clearly obtained 25% of votes cast in 12 out of 19 states. In a 13th state, however, he obtained only 19.94% of votes cast in that state. Now, the question arose as to what is 2/3 of 19 states? If you do the calculation, it's 12.6 actually. So approximately 13, right? But the Election Commission held that it meant 12 of the 19 states made 2/3 states. And since Shehu Shagari obtained more than 1/4 of 2/3 of the vote cast in the 13th state, he was declared elected president. Now, this was challenged by Obafemi Awolowo of the UPN, who was the candidate at that time with the next highest votes. He came before a special presidential election tribunal, and he appealed also before the Supreme Court of Nigeria. However, his main contention was that 2/3 of 19 states is 13 and not 12, and that in the alternative, on the premise that 2/3 of 19 states is 12, only 2/3 of the votes received by Shehu Shagari in his 13th state should be used in computing whether he had received 1/4 of 2/3 of all the votes cast in that election. The special tribunal, consisting of 3 eminent justices, unanimously rejected Awolowo's arguments and upheld the election. The Supreme Court also went that way on appeal, concurred, and dismissed the appeal by a majority of 6-1. Now, 44 years after, it's 2023, and there are 4 major contenders in this election, and some are questioning the chances of a winner emerging in the first ballot. As a matter of fact, there are talks about this election going into a runner for the first time in over 4 decades. Let's talk to a lawyer who should know. Ibrahim Lawal joins us live from Osun State. Mr. Lawal, thank you for joining us on the countdown. Tell us precisely what you think was on the mind of the framers of this section of the Constitution.
Putting in the requirement for a person seeking to be president of Nigeria is to ensure that he has presence in at least 2/3 of the states of the Federation, including Abuja. Um, apart from the fact that he has majority vote, he must also have a presence in at least 2/3 of the states comprising the state of the federation. So the framer believe that a president should emerge who enjoys the support of at least 2/3 of the majority, 2/3 of Nigeria, must support at least 1/4 in 2/3 of the states of the federation, 36 states, including Abuja. So the idea is that you must have a presence and you must enjoy support of at least various sections of Nigeria. Unlike if it is just simple majority,
Indeed,
where a president will emerge by having 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 states out of 36 states, and he says he's the president of the country. So they want to, apart from the fact that he must score majority votes, he must also ensure that he scored at least 25% in at least 2/3 of the states comprising, the entity called Nigeria.
Indeed.
And I think that is the idea behind it.
So it's not just about having the highest number of votes. Your votes must come from a widespread
it is
across
not.
the country.
You must also have, yes, it must be widespread.
Indeed.
You must have presence so that you know that you are governing the country. You have the support of at least majority of Nigerians.
So the U.S. Constitution, where Nigeria seems to have copied its presidential system of government from, has what they call the electoral college system. But what's the similarities between these two systems, particularly in determining the winner of an election, and how popular the winner is? Mr. Lawal, if you can hear me, I'm asking that we draw a comparison between the system here in Nigeria as well as the electoral college system in America as to deciding that the person who wins an election is actually popular amongst the electorate.
I lost you. I can't hear you. The thing just got restored. So I didn't get your point.
I can hear you now, Mr. Lawal. I was talking about the U.S. Constitution, where Nigeria seems to have gotten its presidential system of government from. I'm asking if you see similarities between its electoral college system and what we have here in Nigeria.
No. Our own system is different from system of emergence is different from that of the US, particularly on the issue of electoral college. We don't have it in our constitution. What we have simpliciter is that in section 134(2), if there are multiple candidates, what we have is that you must at least win majority of votes cast. And then secondly, you must win at least 1/4 of the 2/3. You must have 25% present in at least 2/3 of 36 states. That's just the requirement. The other requirement of electoral college is not, and you will realize that in a pluralistic society like us, where illiteracy is still more prevalent, I think our own is more simpler than what is obtainable in the US. We are all witnesses to the election, that brought in the former president now, where the majority votes were scored by the other candidate, but the electoral college gave it to the former US president, So it will create a lot of labour if you try that here, because a lot of people will not understand how the process works. So I think the framework of the Constitution, taking into account our own understanding and the peculiarities, pitch their own sense to that of simple majority as well as geographical spread. I
How,
think that is basically what we do. So it is different.
indeed, it is. How sacrosanct, Mr. Lawal, do you think these provisions are, particularly when you consider other provisions of the Electoral Act? An example would be voided votes. Voided votes being less than margin of votes between the winner and the runner-up. Do you think that by any chance these particular provisions can be ignored, considering these other aspects of the
No, that
Electoral Act?
even if you look at the Constitution itself, it has said that if you look at the sub 3 of the Constitution, it said in default of a candidate duly elected in accordance with subsection 2 of this section, there shall be a second election in accordance with subsection 4 of this section. So the Constitution had spelled it out. The Electoral Act is subservient to the Constitution. So the Constitution is very clear as to if you don't meet that particular threshold, and maybe the margin of between the winner and the first runner up is close, such that you could not even determine the winner, or even the person who scored the highest number of votes did not also fulfill the condition of its geographical spread. There will be a rerun in that kind of a situation. So the Constitution identifies it, and that's why you have in subsection 3, it said this specifically where it could not meet subsection 2, 134.2, then the INEC is empowered to conduct the second election, and that's what you call run election. So the Constitution has taken care of it. There is no way any law can supersede that of the Constitution. The Constitution is the governor, and whatever law you are going to make must flow from the Constitution. Any law that is contrary to the Constitution is so whatever provision of the provision of the Constitution. So there is no way a constitutional provision can be jettisoned for any law. It's not possible. Constitution is the ground norm, is the mother of all laws.
Absolutely. This subject appears to be quite relevant with 4 main contenders in this election, and I know that political parties are now crossing their T's and dotting their I's to ensure that their candidates meet all of these requirements. Ibrahim Lawal, thank you so much for talking to us on the countdown.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's my pleasure. Okay.
Well, now let's talk about the impact of social media on the Nigerian electoral politics. Some political stakeholders have continuously played down its actual influence on the election. They say the voters aren't online. But social media has been significant in Nigeria's electoral system since 2011, inspired by the election of Barack Obama in 2008. Today, the Nigerian Communications Commission estimates that there are almost 150 million internet users in Nigeria. Active social media users, excluding about 90 million WhatsApp users, are estimated at approximately 32 million as of January 2022, based on data compiled by Data Reporter, an online reference library. And this includes about 26 million Facebook users, 9 million on Instagram, 6 million on LinkedIn, and 9.5 million on Snapchat. On the positive side, we have the case of people getting information as it's happening via live streaming. And on the contrary, it's also a medium for fake news. We're going to be talking more about this as we feel the pulse of Nigerians. Stay with us. We'll take a short break now and return with more. You're watching The Countdown. We're counting down to Nigeria's 7th general election. 25th February is for presidential governorship election. 11th March is when the governors and members of the Houses of Assembly will be decided. Now, what's the impact of the social media as to how Nigerians will vote? And of course, the electioneering coming up this year. Social media influencer and political analyst Olusegun Dada joins me now to speak more on this. Thank you for joining us on the program. Let's solve this ongoing puzzle, Segun, once and for all. Will social media make any difference in the voting pattern in this election?
Okay, so thank you very much for having me on this program. And I'm going to say this as someone who has witnessed. This is going to be my 4th presidential campaign cycle. And looking at the evolution of social media, it's two-pronged. The effect of social media on this election, it's not going to really change the minds of people. Social media is more of a marketplace of people trying to peddle their wares, at the same time screaming at the top of their lungs, trying to out-scream one another, all of these things. I mean, to a great extent, it's more of a tool to reinforce your bubble than an opportunity to, be open-minded and learn. I think a lot of people have already made up their minds about the election. The only aspect that social media brings to this election is the aspect of information dissemination, disinformation, fake news, deep fakes, all sorts of manipulations, that can come through in and out of this. And to an extent, it helps spread panic as well as it also helps draw attention to issues that happen on election day. But beyond that, I think that it's going to have that much of an effect. Social media per se on determining who wins this election.
Look at the figures, Olusegun. 26 million Facebook users, 9 million on Instagram, 6 million on LinkedIn, and 9.5 million on Snapchat. INEC says there are some 9.5 million new registrants in this forthcoming election. It sounds like most of them are going to be online. You don't think it matters what the buzz is online right now, because there are real voters there, 9.5 million.
Yes. Okay. So that's a given. The statistics, within the last 4 years, a lot of people have become of voting age. Some people are just becoming of voting age. So definitely, that's why we're seeing that number of new registrants. Now, it has tickled a lot of people's interest in politics, but there's no real metric to show where most of this support is going to. There are people who are very loud online, but does it translate to the realities of things on ground? It really doesn't. So until the elections are over and there's an opportunity to analyze the results, I don't think that that in and of itself as a standalone can make any real breakthrough, in terms of political reach. And like I said before, it's like a marketplace. Everybody's putting out their ideas, adapting to this internet age. Before now, I think the campaigns never really paid much attention to social media. The attention has always been on TV and radio, electronic and broadcast media. But now, because of the way and manner at which information is easily disseminated, because of the disinformation, because of having to keep up with putting up activities, it's now something that it's like a behemoth. Now, even outside of the country, a lot of countries have a lot of problems struggling with how to contain what social media has become in terms of election. Does it change minds? Cambridge Analytica was able to change a few 100,000 minds. Yes, maybe that meant a lot to the US election. But ultimately, the person that won the election, if it was in Nigeria, would have been president, because the person won with the popular vote by over 3 million votes. And, the Trump supporters at that time were more vocal, and, the Cambridge Analytica, micro-targeting and all of that was not able to change beyond over 100,000 mind.
I get
so
to
in a
Shegun.
real election like Nigeria, where
We have to go now, but there are some who would also talk about the NSAS movement in 2020 and how we saw a direct impact of the Twitter conversation as to that particular protest. But you talked about traditional media earlier. What would you advise politicians to do? What should be the ratio of the investment between new media and traditional media, particularly for their campaigns this time?
Okay, so in every election, there is, since the last 3 election cycles, there has always been something that has become a rallying cry for people, for, online savvy individuals. Now, in 2014-15, it was Occupy Nigeria. And that was over the, removal of fuel subsidy without palliatives and all of that, which, spiraled kind of into pushing out the Goodluck Jonathan regime. Now, the NSAS movement is also banked on that. But what the NSAS movement did was that it showed that because of the new large influx of people who are online and more aware, organizing becomes very easy. And people are able to organize themselves in groups, and even, without sitting down together in a place to plan, it becomes a major, problem for even law enforcement to tackle because they don't know how to go after it. Look at cyberbullying, people threatening to kill one another over the internet. Mm-hmm. Most of the law enforcement they don't know how to deal with these issues. Now, this is why the traditional media, the incoming administration or politicians or political parties, as it may, must realize that the attention that they give to traditional media is, if it was 100%, has to go to maybe like 50 or 40, because the whole world has their phone on their fingertips and they can easily catch up on the latest news. Sometimes, by the time they are reporting the news the next morning, you probably have seen it on social media hours before that.
The world is literally moving online.
So it's
and we also had a U.S. president who was
moving
making
online, and it's in real time. So so it's in real time, and people are able to capture, things without any modification, without any subject to editorials and all of that. So the traditional media is playing catch up to a great extent. We're seeing it happening in real time. Even your colleagues in Arise TV fell for this. They picked up a news item that was floating online and reported it as news without confirming first, because we are in the world of fast news. People want to, if it is 30 minutes old, it's old news. If it's 1 hour old, it's old news. So, the traditional media is even playing catch up to a great extent right now. So I think the incoming administration should pay a lot of attention in seeing how to regulate these behemoths that we have.
Absolutely, Shegun. And I know that in the coming days and coming months, the question of regulation of the social media will also arise again. But that's our time. We have to go now. I'm sure we'll continue this conversation some other time. Olusegun Dada is a social media influencer and political analyst. Thank you for your time. That's our program today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, 6 p.m. You can watch a repeat broadcast by 6 a.m. tomorrow. Remember to follow us on our social media handles. Use the hashtag TVC Countdown 2023 for all your comments. Thanks for staying tuned. We're back at 7 p.m. for all the news updates as well as the headlines home and abroad. I am Nifemi Ogunsoye.